Can you hear me? It's Graham here.
Sorry?
Oh, yeah, it's good. I couldn't hear. I got no sound at the last meeting that I was in. There was no. I got no audio. I had to reload. Had to upgrade or something to Zoom. In the discussion group, I couldn't get any sound at all. Yeah.
No.
Okay.
Sorry for that. Yeah, the ghost in the machine. All right, what are we doing? Yeah, just the people are a bit. We start with the Heart Sutra, right?
Yes, we do. I prostrate to the
Arya Triple Gem that
one time the Bhagavan was rolling on the subconscious mountain in Vajragriha.
to get a great community of monks and a great community of Bodhisattvas. Once we're done,
Bhagavan was absorbed in the
concentration on categories of phenomena called from perception. Then the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya, Avalokiteshvara looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those five eye gates also as empty of inherent nature. Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra, said this to the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya, Avalokiteshvara. How should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya, Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra. Any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon like this, correctly and impressively beholding those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Emptiness is form, emptiness is not other than form, form is also not other than emptiness. Same way, feeling, discrimination, composition, practice, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stains, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness there is no form, no composition, practice, no consciousness. Eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomenon. There is no I element and so on, not to including no mind element and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance and so on, not to include no aging and death and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, Bodhisattvas rely on the dwell in the perfection of wisdom, without obscuration, without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the end point of nirvana. All the Buddhas that dwell in the three times also manifestly completely awaken, perfect complete enlightenment in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra equal to the unequal, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering should be known as a truth since it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared Tayata Om Gate Gate Para Samgate Bodhisattva. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, should train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagavan arose from that concentration and commanded Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya, Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage, it is like that, it is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom, just as you have indicated, even the Tathagatas rejoice. The Bhagavan, having thus spoken, the Venerable Shariputra, Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya, Avalokiteshvara, those surrounding in their entirety, along with the words, along with the Suras and Gandharvas, overjoyed and highly praised that spoken by the Bhagavan. Let's do that in English, the refuge before teaching. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the highest assembly. From the revelations I collect by listening to the teachings, may I attain the state of Buddha to be able to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the highest assembly. From the accumulations that I collect by listening to the teachings, may I attain the state of Buddha to be able to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha. And attain the state of Buddha to be able to benefit all sentient beings. All right, so I have lots of stuff on my menu. Geshe-la covered today, I think, 12 verses. So it went, it's almost like going supersonic comparing to previous sessions. It's still, probably less than average if you compare it to Geshe-la Tsering's teaching, where he sometimes did like 30 or 40 verses a session. When I said less than average, I don't mean the quality, it's more like just the speed, right? Teachings are excellent because I think that, I'm enjoying this time round because we have time to think about the verses. Also, Geshe-la gives a lot of practical advice for practice, not only in terms of sitting in meditation, but just day-to-day approach to a Dhamma practice. So I think that this is really invaluable. So let's get into it. So Avis wrote a question here asking about verse 8. So I'll get to that in a few minutes. I just wanted to just continue on quickly from what we discussed yesterday, which I think that was quite complicated. We spoke about afflicting and cognitive obscurations. I also showed this chart on the screen. I corrected the chart, or I changed it in the evening. I had another think about it, so I just wanted to quickly go through what I changed. Just a second. Obscurations. All right, put it on the screen.
Oh, sorry. If she gives her apologies, she's got a medical appointment.
All right.
And palliation as well.
So we spoke yesterday about afflictive obscurations, and we said that within afflictive obscurations, there are two things: there are consciousnesses and seeds. But actually, when you look at the way that Jitsumpa defines and then provides a division of afflictive obscurations, he says that those are, first of all, afflictive obscurations, if you remember, these are the obscurations that mainly obstruct the attainment of liberation. And then in his division, he said that there are two forms of afflictive obscurations. They are intellectually acquired and innate. So there are intellectually acquired consciousnesses and innate consciousnesses. Just roughly speaking about it, we're not going to go into great details, but intellectually acquired consciousnesses are certain beliefs that you have, states of mind that you have, which you came up with through reasoning, through a system of tenets, through certain philosophies. So they are incorrect, but still you have a reason for holding those views. And the reason is likely to be incorrect. Like, for example, there are certain philosophies, non-Buddhist philosophies that assert the existence of an inherently existing self. Also within the Buddhist tradition, there are those that assert an inherently existing self. So they have an intellectually acquired belief or a wrong view. So this is one type of consciousness that is intellectually acquired. Then we have the seeds of those consciousnesses, right? So seeds of intellectually acquired consciousnesses. So this is on the right top part of the screen. Then we have innate consciousnesses. Now, innate afflictions are those afflictions which do not require a philosophical view or tenet to exist. They exist naturally in a mind stream. So, for example, just to illustrate that, animals don't have intellectually acquired philosophical views. Also, I think that if you look at the majority of humanity, or many parts of humanity, I don't know if it's the majority, but many people don't necessarily ascribe to a certain religion or philosophical view. They don't maybe even care about philosophical views. They just live the life the life, just on a day-to-day basis without asking questions or coming up with certain philosophical views. So also, many of them don't have fully formed, intellectually acquired wrong consciousnesses or wrong views, but they still have innate ones. Those innate ones are those which are the root of cyclic existence, because animals still reincarnate, hell beings still reincarnate. Most of us still reincarnate. Many people still reincarnate without having an intellectually acquired wrong view. They have an innate one, right? So the root of cyclic existence is innate ignorance, innate grasping of the self. So it also has seeds, right? So let's look at a chart again. So innate afflictive obscurations have consciousnesses, but also have seeds for the innate ones. These are the serious ones, the innate ones. These are the ones that we need to eliminate. But first thing first, we deal with a cause one, intellectually acquired, a certain point of our spiritual development. And once we get rid of this cause level, then we'll get to deal with the innate level. So that's what I wanted to add with respect to the obscurations from yesterday. Another thing that we spoke of yesterday was explicit and implicit. So having an implicit realization and an explicit realization. So we said that explicit is a realization in which the aspect of the object that is realized appears to the mind. So for example, I have an eye consciousness that can realize blue. Blue as the aspect appears to an eye consciousness realizing it. Similarly, I can have a mental consciousness that realizes impermanence. The aspect of impermanence appears to the mental consciousness that realizes it. So that is an explicit realization. There are implicit realizations, which are realizations, but without aspects appearing to them. Like, for example, if I understand that Chukila is none and none, implicitly, I realize that she's not a monk. But when I realize that she's a nun, I can say that implicitly I realize that she's not a monk. Of course, I can add into that to make it more clear. Like, for example, the ordained person that is Chuki is a nun. What appears to me is none. Implicitly, what I realize that the ordained person named Chuki is not monk. So not monk doesn't appear to the realizing consciousness. Now, why are we talking about it? To begin with, we speak about perceptual realizations, right? Our goal is to generate a perceptual realization of emptiness. A perceptual realization of emptiness will eliminate our ignorance and therefore our afflictive states of mind, together with the seeds, that will lead us to the state of liberation, and more than that, to the state of enlightenment. So perceptual realizations are also explicit realizations. So perceptual realization of emptiness means that emptiness explicitly appears to the realization. The aspect of emptiness appears to the realization. So we have Arya beings that attain a perceptual realization of emptiness, and when they attain a perceptual realization of emptiness, they're in meditative equipoise. They're single-pointedly placed on emptiness. What appears to the mind at that point is only emptiness. No other conventional phenomena appears to that Arya being. Which means that in terms of their perceptual realization of emptiness, they're realizing ultimate truth. Ultimate truth appears to the mind. Nothing else appears to the mind. No conventionality appears to the mind at this point. Which means that there is a perceptual realization at that point in time, a perceptual realization of ultimate truth, but there is no, at the same time, there is no realization of conventional truth. Later on, they arise from that meditative equipoise, and again, conventionalities appear to the mind. So at that point, they can have perceptual realization of conventional truths, but they cannot have perceptual realization of ultimate truths. So for non-Buddhas, perceptual realization of ultimate truths and conventional truths cannot occur at the same time. Only Buddha can have a perceptual realization of the two. Only Buddha can have the aspects of both the conventional and ultimate appearing to the mind at the same time. Only for a Buddha. For us, we cannot have that because of cognitive obscurations. And this is what Geshe-la mentioned yesterday. Cognitive obscurations obstruct the simultaneous perceptual realization of the two truths. There's more to it, but we're not going to make it complicated. Let's leave it like that. It's complicated enough. Yeah. Any questions before we move on?
I have two.
Yeah.
So could you say that explicit and perceptual are synonyms?
Could said that explicit and perceptual are synonym. No, because conceptual realization also have an explicit thing. You know, the object, the aspect of the object appears to it. Therefore, it realizes an object explicitly. So, no, I didn't want to make it more complicated, but since you asked that, I will. But just we're not going to dwell on that. Just to give you something to think about. So, non-Buddhas, sentient beings, cannot have simultaneous perceptual realization of the two truths. They can still have simultaneous realization of the two truths, but not perceptual. Not in a perceptual way. So a conceptual realization of emptiness, for example, can know which an object appears to it explicitly, emptiness, also have an explicit appearance of the generic image of emptiness. Now, the generic image of emptiness is a conventional truth, which means that there are two aspects that appear to it. An ultimate, the aspect of the ultimate, and the aspect of the conventional. So it can exist as being a sentient being, but not for a sentient being, not in a perceptual realization.
My other quick question was, in the Arya's perceptual realization of emptiness, can they also be realizing implicitly the lack of truth?
So for an Arya's exalted knowledge of native equipoise, realizing emptiness.
But in that single point and moment after seeing where you're perceptually realizing emptiness.
Yeah.
I know you said that that's all that's appearing to their mind.
Yeah, emptiness.
But you also say that they're implicitly realizing the lack of true existence, that things don't inherently exist because they're saying that.
Well, so when an Arya being single-pointedly placed in emptiness, perceptually realizing emptiness, they're realizing the lack of inherent existence or the lack of true existence.
Yeah, so they're having an explicit consciousness.
Yeah.
Is there an implicit consciousness there?
Well, is there an implicit realization as well? Yes, there is. Like, for example, you could say that. So there is a debate that comes with respect to that. Like, for example, an Arya's exalted knowledge of meditative equipoise, an Arya's exalted knowledge of meditative equipoise realizes itself, but it doesn't realize itself explicitly. It realizes itself implicitly. Sorry?
Can you say that bit again?
So an Arya's exalted knowledge of meditative equipoise that perceptually realizes emptiness, which means that in short, it's a long sentence, that perceptual realization of emptiness implicitly realizes itself.
Itself as lacking inherent existence.
Not just itself, consciousness. But without it appearing to itself. Yeah, I mean, it's part of a big discussion with respect to, the mind knowledge school speaks of self-cognition or self-knower. And they say that the whole idea behind asserting self-knower, the whole purpose is to attest to the existence of consciousness. How does something exist? It exists if something knows it. How do we know that consciousness exists? If there's a self-knower that knows it. So the Madhyamika school, Madhyamika Prasangika particularly, negates the existence of self-knower. There's no self-cognition. So how can we verify that consciousness exists? One thing is that you can say that it exists because it depends upon the object. If there's an object, there's a subject. But also you can say that consciousness realizes itself. But then if we say that consciousness realizes itself, it seems like it is like self-knower, self-cognition. Well, it is not like self-cognition, because self-cognition is a consciousness that realizes, you could say, itself through the appearance of the aspect, which means an explicit realization. So in ours, exalted knowledge of meditative equipoise realizes itself, but implicitly, not explicitly. So this is how you avoid having to assert.
I guess my next question is, if you have an explicit consciousness, do you always have an implicit?
So if you have an explicit consciousness, do you always have an implicit consciousness? No, because I think that the best way to answer your question is Buddhas have only explicit realizations. Now all the realizations of Buddhas are perceptual. The Buddha doesn't have any conceptual realization, only perceptual realization, and the perceptual realization necessitates the appearance of the aspect. So a Buddha doesn't have implicit realizations, only explicit.
For everybody else, though?
For everybody else, I have to think about it. I'm not sure. I'm not, like for example, with respect to an I consciousness, realizing blue.
Then you implicitly know it's not red.
Does the I consciousness implicitly realize that it's not red? I'm not sure. I have to kind of research it and to think about it. It seems that the mental consciousness.
Yeah, I'm just thinking like the way we realize an object is by eliminating everything that's not.
Yeah.
And so we're always doing that until that's not.
Yeah, I wonder if it's kind of, I'm not sure. I still have to kind of, I don't understand this topic completely. So I have to look at perceptual consciousnesses, like for example, an I consciousness. I wonder, is an I consciousness, for example, realizing blue through negating everything that is not blue? I think that yes.
I think
It's not completely settled in my mind. Along the way, before we move on, I want to move on. Graham says, what is the Buddhist definition of perceptual? There's a definition of perception. So the definition of direct perception is an incontrovertible awareness forgot. Yeah, let me. Well, inferential cognition is an incontrovertible determinative knowledge that ascertains its object through the medium. It depends upon a correct reason as a sign, and a perception is that which realizes its object directly or perceptually. Anyway, I will look at that. I forgot the definition. Anyway, let's move on. Sorry for forgetting the definition, but let's move on. So what I wanted to do now, just briefly, is to, since today we started the 4th chapter, and Avis, I will get to your question soon. I promise I will not leave this session without answering your question. So since we started today the 4th chapter, and we said that the 4th chapter comes under the heading of maintaining bodhicitta and preventing it from falling into decline, then it's good to just kind of have a brief, just a brief, I think, overview of what we've covered up until now, so that we don't let go of that. We've been studying this material for, I think, for 3 months now, or almost 3 months, more than 3 months. Sorry?
11 weeks.
11 weeks. So sometimes it's difficult to keep everything in mind. Kind of, we keep isolated points, but not the whole chunk of it. So during the break, I created just for myself a brief outline of what we have spoken so far. Just have to look for it. Where is it? Maybe it's this. Just a second. There it is. All right. So we've covered chapter 1. Sorry. All right, chapter 1. We had an introduction to the text. Then the main chunk of chapter number 1 in the actual explanation was reflecting upon the benefits of bodhicitta. So chapter 1 is speaking of the benefits of bodhicitta in order to inspire us to develop bodhicitta and later on take the Bodhisattva vow. So that's chapter number 1. Explaining the benefits, identifying what bodhicitta is, and then the reasons why there are such benefits. Then we moved on to chapter 2, and we said that in chapter number 2, we are studying the preparation for embracing bodhicitta. The preparations are in terms of the 7 limbs of worship in order to accumulate the collections and purify negativities and obscurations that will facilitate the taking up of not only bodhicitta, but also not only aspiring bodhicitta, but also the engaging bodhicitta. So we had offerings, homage. We spoke about refuge, and refuge is not an official part of the 7 limbs, but still it was there in chapter number 2, and the limb of confession. Then in chapter number 3, which we finished yesterday or the day before yesterday, I think, we spoke of the remaining of the 4 limbs. So rejoicing in virtue, requesting to turn the wheel of Dharma, requesting not to pass into nirvana, and dedicating virtue, and training in giving body possessions and roots of virtue is not part of the 7 limbs, but it was still part of the preparation, as I think training in love or loving kindness to others, and also to accumulate merit, and also to prepare our mind with bodhicitta before we go to the actual part, which is embracing of bodhicitta in verses 23 and 24. Then we had the concluding actions of cultivating joy in oneself and causing others to develop, not job keepers, causing others to develop joy. So this is what we've covered up until now, right? So that kind of, it's good not to lose the backbone, just to have the general structure in mind. Then we started today chapter number 4. So just to have a brief overview. Verse 1 is just a brief presentation of conscientiousness. Then in order to cultivate conscientiousness, we do that with respect to bodhicitta and with respect to the trainings. That's the general structure. Now, since this chapter is titled The Cultivation of Conscientiousness, does anyone remember either precisely or just roughly, briefly, what conscientiousness is? Ethics. Sorry? Alertness. It's kind of conscientious.
Willingness.
Sorry?
Joyous effort.
Joyous effort.
It's preventing the degeneration.
Preventing degeneration. Yeah, we have a definition of conscientiousness in Minds and Mental Factors. It's quite mouthful. And I think that many of the things that you have mentioned are included within the definition of conscientiousness. So I'll just put it on the screen briefly. All right. So first of all, conscientiousness is one of the 11 virtuous mental factors. It is here. So it is a cultivation of virtuous qualities within abiding in non-attachment, non-hatred, non-ignorance, as well as effort. So that's one part, right? So it is the cultivation of virtuous qualities. And it seems that the second part is guards the mind against contamination. The function is it thoroughly completing and fully establishing all mundane and supramundane success. So when we translate it to, or when we adapt it to what we're dealing with here in the 4th chapter, guarding conscientiousness with respect to bodhicitta and guarding conscientiousness with respect to the trainings. So if we want to guard conscientiousness with respect to bodhicitta, then it needs to be a cultivation of virtuous quality within abiding in non-attachment, non-hatred, and non-ignorance, as well as effort. So it fits, I think, quite beautifully when you think of what is required in order to develop bodhicitta. First of all, you need effort. You need a lot of effort to develop bodhicitta, joyous effort, to rejoice in virtue. But also, it is the cultivation of the virtuous quality of bodhicitta, loving, a sense of compassion, love to others, of everything that is included within bodhicitta, when you abide in non-attachment, non-hatred, and non-ignorance, which means without that sense of partiality, holding some as closed and others as distant from you, without anger, attachment, and ignorance. So it also guards the mind against contamination, the contamination of self-cherishing, for example. So this is my own interpretation of, or way of looking at how you cultivate conscientiousness with respect to bodhicitta, but then Shantideva explains that in great detail. So I think that all of that will come together as fitting this definition of conscientiousness. So just before we move on, there is also in the 20 secondary afflictions, there is the affliction of non-conscientiousness, right? That's part of the 20 secondary affliction. So non-conscientiousness, it is a looseness of mind that does not cultivate virtuous qualities and does not guard the mind from the afflictions and misdeeds. Which I think that it also says it abides within attachment, hatred, ignorance, and laziness. So when you look at what Shantideva explains with respect to how to guard conscientiousness with respect to bodhicitta and with respect to the training, it speaks of the things that are incongruous or not conducive with bodhicitta and the training. How to develop conscientiousness with respect to the afflictions. How to develop conscientiousness with respect to wrongdoings. Conscientiousness, yeah, conscientiousness is extremely important. It seems that sometimes when I think of conscientiousness and I cannot remember all the definition of the mental factor conscientiousness, it seems to me if I summarize it into one party line or one slogan, it would be doing the right thing. It's like doing the right thing. You're have joyous effort. You're doing the right thing without attachment, anger, and ignorance.
Yeah. As a teacher, I used to use that term a lot on kid reports. When you're talking about kids being conscientious, that was a very positive comment on a report card. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's
yeah.
Is it the same word in Tibetan?
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. So in the benefits of particularly engaging bodhicitta, I think that it came up in the section of engaging bodhicitta. It says that once you have engaging bodhicitta, you will still continue to accrue merit even while you're asleep or unconscientious. And the commentary said that, for example, when you're being intoxicated, it's pretty weird, isn't it? Kind of, to me, it doesn't kind of, it's the same word that is used. Don't understand exactly how it is the case, but yeah.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't give you free rein, Graham.
Only joking, of course.
Me too. All right. So then another thing that I wanted to cover today was looking again at the rough outline. So we have cultivating conscientiousness with regards to bodhicitta and cultivating conscientiousness with regards to the training. Now, Geshe also referred to that at the beginning of the session when he spoke about the 4 ways of gathering disciples. So I thought of just speaking about that briefly. How did it come up, the 4 ways of gathering disciples? So he spoke about it also in discussion group. That's great. All right. So in the short explanation of the way to meditate on conscientiousness, it says, after the children of the conquerors have very firmly accepted bodhicitta, they should unwaveringly strive always to not transgress the trainings. The second paragraph in the commentary says they should also unwaveringly protect the trainings of the 6 perfections and the 4 ways of attracting disciples, so as to not waver from them and that they never decrease. So in Lama Tsongkhapa's Lamrim Chenmo, when he explains, having generated bodhicitta, he explains what you need to do in order to maintain bodhicitta. Then he goes on and explains what you need to do in order to train in the deeds of bodhisattvas. So I'll put it on the screen, that brief explanation. So it is found in the 2nd volume of the Lamrim Chenmo. In just a second. Sorry, just a second. All right, in page 103 in the Lamrim Chenmo. So I'll put it on the screen. This is a way of making it bigger. Sorry? Yeah, well, all right, let's try this. Just a second, bear with me, people at home. All right, I think that now it should work. Okay. So, how to train after taking the vows? Then the first point is what the precepts are based upon. It says there are limitless clear categorizations, but if you arrange the Bodhisattva precepts by type, you can include them all within the 6 perfections. So, right, so all the trainings are included within the 6 perfections. The 6 perfections are thus the great condensation of all the key points of the Bodhisattva path. The 4 ways to gather disciples, they are generosity, pleasant speech, working at the aims, and consistency of behavior are also included within these 6 perfections as follows. So before we get to that, sometimes it is said that The 6 perfections are those practices that you use in order to tame your own mind, to subdue your own mind. And the 4 ways of gathering disciples are the 4 things that you use in order to subdue or to tame others' minds. Of course, I think that if you look at each one of those sections, the 6 perfections, or the 4 ways of gathering, you need to both tame your own mind, but also to work for the sake of others. But sometimes you find that they are listed under those 2 categories. So, the 4 ways of gathering disciples. The first one is generosity. It says that generosity is included is obvious. Now, generosity is providing, for example, disciples or students with provisions that they need. In that, if someone is suffering from a day-to-day survival struggle, if they don't have enough food on their plate, if you want to care for them so that the mind would be more receptive to the Dhamma, you provide them with whatever they need. Or it is also possible that someone might have all the means, but they have that strong attachment to something. You might be generous in giving them something in order to hook them up, right? So that's the first. I think that is also connected with what we say about the perfection of generosity, since sentient beings want happiness, and happiness comes for resources to begin with. Kind of the most, I think, shallow level or coarse level comes from resources. The Buddha first of all discussed on giving. So giving is the first way of gathering disciples. Then pleasant speech is giving instructions to disciples. Now, often it is said that it's not just speaking pleasantly, it's also speaking skillfully to a student. Sometimes if you're skillful, you can be a little bit harsh with a student if they need it. And that could also be a way of attracting them, rather than just all the time praising them. You can also say something that might be hurtful in order to get their attention, but of course you need to be skillful in doing it.
Or using logic. So I've seen a lot of guys in prison who was checking me out and to start debating with me, and started debating back, and when him and his mates went down the road and said, "She's good."
Tough love. Tough love. All right. Then the third one is, so it says pleasant speech or skillful speech is giving instructions to disciples, taking the 6 perfections as the point of departure. Then working at the ends is establishing others in the ends of these instructions, which means that you help others to fulfill the ends of those instructions, the Mahayana instructions in general, particularly the trainings in Bodhichitta and all the preliminaries that are needed in order to develop Bodhichitta, which means teaching them the lowest scope, the medium scope, and then also teaching them on Bodhichitta and the deeds of Bodhisattvas. Then the last one is consistency of behavior is practicing just as the disciple does. This is actually being very skillful. Now, if you're giving instructions to others, but your behavior is unethical, it is likely that others would be less than impressed.
That was the deception.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't actually deception.
Yeah, but it is a form of deception. Yeah.
What was the third one again, please, Kautz?
The third one, let's put it on the screen again. It's working at aims, which means that it is working, you can say working for their welfare is establishing others in the aims of these instructions, in the purpose of these instructions. So you're fulfilling the purpose of others through, or helping them to fulfill the purpose in giving them teachings and leading them along the way, the path of those teachings, inspiring them, giving them instructions, telling them what to do, eliminate their doubts through speaking pleasantly or skillfully.
And according to their level.
And according to the level of development.
Working towards others' welfare, is that?
Yeah, you are working for others' welfare. but you also do it not just in a general way, not just in, like, for example, providing the sick with medicine or the hungry with food. That's giving things to others, but you do it more like in a particular way, in a specific way, in fulfilling the aims in terms of their spiritual needs, their Dharma needs, leading them along the steps of the path, because it all comes under the umbrella of the way to gather disciples. Now, this is the way to gather disciple is the way that it was translated into English. In Tibetan, they call it the 4 things that you amass, or the four things that you need to have under your belt in order to be able to care for others. So rather than thinking that I want to establish court of disciples, I want to have many students, it's more like the things that you need to have under your belt in order to be able to care for others. So in order to be able to care for others, you need to be generous, and you need to be generous also in a practical way, not just the intention to give, but to give others in order to open the way for them to be interested in the Dhamma, for example, or to give them the conditions that are right for studying and practicing the Dhamma. You need to teach them skillfully. You need to help them to accomplish their spiritual path in terms of teaching, reflection, and meditation. And then also, you yourself need to behave in a way that accords with the teaching. Sorry? Avis. All right. So having started with that, I had so many things that I wanted to say today, and I thought that there would be absolutely no way that I would have all the time to do that. So I just spoke fast. Sorry for that. So I have time. Let's look at Avis's question. So Avis was asking about verse number 8. Let's put it on the screen. That's not verse number 8. All right, so if one's bodhicitta degenerates, then it is a heavy downfall and will degenerate one's work for the welfare of others. This is for bodhisattvas the heaviest of downfalls. Therefore, if one receives it, one harms the purpose of sentient beings. I think that Avis's question was particularly with respect to the quote from the Superior Compendium. Although one has practiced the path and 10 grounds for 10 million eons, if one generates the wish to be a self-liberated arhat, at that moment morality has received the fault and degenerated. This mind generation is much heavier than a root downfall. So let's look at Avis's question again. So all right.
So I'm not really sure what does it mean by more heavier than the root downfall? I thought that's just a root downfall itself. I don't know.
All right, look at that again. So in that moment, morality has received a fault and degenerated. The mind generation is much heavier than a root downfall. It says here that in the commentary, so this mind generation, it means that kind of degenerate the mind that wishes to be a self-liberator. So this is first of all what mind generation means. So if you generate a mind that wishes to be a self-liberated arhat, which means that if you think you have developed aspiring bodhicitta, then you have taken the vow, you have engaging bodhicitta. And then at some point in time you think, this is not for me, this is too hard. I want to become an arhat, a solitary realized arhat. Generating this mind is said to be heavier than a downfall.
It's giving up bodhicitta.
Yeah, which means that giving up bodhicitta, it is a root downfall. But let's look at the commentary, because the commentary, I think, adds some more details about it. It says, as it's stated, if a bodhisattva with vows gave up bodhicitta, he receives a root downfall. If he has no vows, his negativity is still heavier than the root downfall of all the vows of individual liberation. So I think that Avis, it says that this mind generation, meaning generating the mind that wishes to attain the state of an arhat for your own sake, is heavier than a root downfall with respect to a vow of individual liberation. I mean, it's still interesting. I think that this is my way of interpreting this. I hope that this is correct. Normally, when we speak about the pratimoksha vows, the vows of personal liberation, we don't use the word downfall with respect to them. We speak about, for example, a defeat with respect to the vow, or that which is similar to defeat with respect to the vow. Although we don't use the term downfall often, it is still there. When you look at, I think, the fine prints of the vows, then I think that within commentaries, you do find the word downfall. I mean, if the etymological explanation of the word downfall is that if you perform that particular action, you will fall down to the miserable realm. So if you accrue a defeat with respect to your ordination vow, if you accrue that which is similar to a defeat with respect to your ordination vow, it's still an action in general that is said to take you to a miserable realm. Right? So
verse 9 carries on that, doesn't it? Verse 9 carries on from verse 8 in that way.
Let's see. Verse 9 comes under the heading of, it is the same if one obstructs the virtue of another bodhisattva. When another, even only for one instant, obstruct their merits, they harm the purpose of sentient beings, there is no other possibility than to go to the lower realms. We did speak about something like that before, right? Kind of engendering harm towards a bodhisattva is considered to be such a great disparaging a bodhisattva, bad-mouthing them, impeding their actions is causing also the harm of other sentient beings, and therefore it is considered to be a heavy downfall. So whoever obstructs the merit, meaning virtue of bodhisattva, for even just one moment, harms the ability of that bodhisattva to accomplish the welfare of sentient beings. Where else could he go but to the lower realms?
In my translation, I've got the Stephen Batchelor one. It actually states in the last line, there will be no end to their rebirth in lower realms, or in lower states, rather. There'll be no end to their rebirths in lower states with the last line of verse.
That's what it is in the...
Yeah, that's why it is also in the FPMT translation, which I can put on this. No end to their unfortunate rebirth. Sounds pretty heavy, doesn't it?
Yes.
Don't do that. Don't do that.
Be careful.
Yeah, I know. Not always I'm careful, but I'm trying. Trying my best. All right, verse number 9, I'm putting it on the screen. Should others, for even a single instant, hinder or obstruct his merit by weakening the welfare of sentient beings, there will be no end to their unfortunate rebirths. It's quite a tough predicament, isn't it?
Heavy indeed.
Yes. Let's look at, again, let's look briefly at this. So today we spoke about the brief presentation of conscientiousness. Then the extensive explanation is divided into cultivating conscientiousness with regards to bodhicitta, and this is the section that we've covered today. The reason it is inappropriate to discard bodhicitta, and the disadvantages of discarding bodhicitta. So the discussion that we just had now comes out of this section. But I wanted just to pull maybe one or maybe two other points that we've discussed today. So the reason is it is inappropriate to discard bodhicitta. At some point, Geshe-la, using the commentary, made that point, and I just wanted to kind of just mention it. So you have an intention to give something to another person. Like, for example, this is something that sometimes happens to me. kind of, I get, like, for example, an email of, let's say that Chenrezig Institute is fundraising for something. I get an email, and it says that we need such so much money, such and such money for getting this particular thing, and I think that, oh, that's very nice, that's really virtuous. I'm willing to give $200. I give them $200, but I don't give it immediately. Then in time, kind of stinginess kicks in. It's like, no. So in my mind, I'm committed to give them. Sorry.
I was going to say forgetfulness.
Or forgetfulness, but it's more like, yeah, it could be forgetfulness, but no, it's more. I think that even more serious is that stinginess, kind of when the time comes where you can actually give, you hold back. So in your mind, committed to give them. In that sense, kind of, let's say that in my mind, I've already relinquished something that belongs to me. I mean, not only with money, when we think of, for example, when we think of possessions, I have quite a few things in my house, and I think that, if I meet that person, I know that they need it, so I'll give it to them. But then a few days later, I think that actually, maybe I can still use it. So next time that I see that person, I don't give it to them.
You put a sticky label on it with their name.
Yeah.
No longer yours.
Yeah, that's a way of doing that. Put a sticky label on that. But according to what according to what we've covered today, and also the scriptural citation, that itself considered to be a cause for being born in invisible realm, as a preta realm. I mean, in that sense, it's like you've relinquished something from your mind. You've gave it to others, but you still hold on to it. So,
or even worse, you actually give it to them and you still hold on.
Yeah. Yeah, giving something with generosity and then regretting it is kind of really digging our own grave, isn't it? Paul?
But if you're if you're aware of it, it's not so bad, is it?
If you're aware of it, what do you mean?
If you're aware of your stinginess or anything.
Well, if you're aware of your stinginess, it's quite recognizing of.
You just forget.
Well, I think stingy, don't you? You have to really stop being stingy, not just recognize that you're stingy.
Yeah. I mean, the first point, the first step is recognizing our own faults, but the mere recognition of a fault is already creating some diminishment of those faults, but we cannot really stop in recognizing them. Like, for example, when you get angry at another person, you can think, I'm now angry at that person. Anger is not a positive thing, but if you don't follow it up with applying an antidote to anger and you just kind of let it linger, it's still there. Similarly, if you think to yourself, I've committed to give something to another person, but you still hold on to it with a sense of miserliness, recognizing that your miserly is excellent. That's the first step for working it out. Actually, an antidote to miserliness is, once we recognize that we're holding on to something without being able to give it, is to force ourselves to give it. It's like, if I give it, I work against my miserliness. I mean, it's easier said than done, because we still create stories in our mind why we cannot give it. It's still of value to us. It's still going to benefit us and so forth. It's not easy. But the first step is to recognize that it is there, that miserliness kicks in, and then we need to apply an antidote. Easier said than done.
Yeah, we tend to make excuses, don't we? I think, rather than give things, don't we?
Mm.
I guess also, if you become aware of it and then you regret it, and then you start in the process of purification as well, so then you remedy it by giving it away, applying an antidote.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, totally. I'm wondering, by the way, I tried to change the setting of the mic. I'm wondering if you guys at home can hear our discussion here in the class, or is it still better to repeat it?
Yeah, it's still better to repeat it. We can hear it sometimes, but not all the time.
All right. Sharp said that also when you recognize a certain affliction and you regret it, you also work, to complete the 4 parts of the antidote, including the power of the antidote, the power of thorough application of the antidote, in which you remedy things like stinginess and so forth.
Because I think Yeshua said this morning in commentary, Like if you take the vow and then, if you break it or have the downfall, and you recognize your stinginess, oh, that's okay, I can purify later, or I can retake the vow, or, or whatever, then
that postpones the attainments of the ground. Yeah. So yeah, it's a good point to make, and so let's look at why we're mentioning it. So the reason it is inappropriate to discard bodhicitta is that, just as it is the case is stated in scripture, that if you promise in your mind to give something to another person and you withhold that, that's a cause for being born in the miserable realm, such as a preta, a hungry ghost. Then when you make a promise in front of all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and also you think of all sentient beings, and then you think that actually, no, it's too hard for me, I'm not going to do it, you're breaking the promise. And that's like lying to Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and to sentient beings. So it becomes a grave fault. Then we have the disadvantages of discarding bodhicittas. I think that there were 3 points in that section. Let's just briefly look at the outline. So because you will migrate to the lower realms, what was the contradiction about? And then an objection. Oh, the objection was about the story with Shariputra. Yeah, Shariputra was someone asked him to give him his right hand, cut his right hand, offered it with the left. In Indian and Tibetan tradition, it's considered to be, well, just maybe kind of throw it up in the air and then kicks it like a hawk. Anyway, sorry for that, Shariputra. Yeah, but sometimes kind of when you're in India traveling, when you travel in India or Tibet and kind of, someone's asking for something and you just kind of hand it over with the left hand. Sometimes people find it offensive in these cultures, So the story goes that the person was, he was berating Shariputra for giving him the hand with the left hand. So Shariputra just gave up and said, it's too difficult. I might attend liberation, the state of an arhat. He was able to attend the state of an arhat. So someone says, but so you've disproved yourself. You've just contradicted yourself. So just as we say, as we say in Christianity and also in Judaism, God's work is mysterious. Or
God works in mysterious ways.
God's work in a mysterious way. Only Buddhas know all the ins and outs of karma. That's the answer that was given in scripture. Anyway, some of us only have one working hand. What about disability? Yeah, it is true. Well, announcement?
Teaching tonight, teaching tomorrow morning.
All right, announcement. So before we leave it, we have teaching tonight, teaching tomorrow morning. There's tomorrow morning we have the Middling Lamrim. Today, Geshe-la will probably continue with teaching on refuge. 17th, 18th, and 19th, His Holiness will give teachings from Chandrakirti's supplement to the Middle Way. We have a free translation that was done by Thupten Jinpa. Excellent translation of the text. It's going to be 3 sessions, so obviously His Holiness is not going to teach the whole text. I assume that it will pull out verses from the beginning. At the beginning, there is homage to compassion. I assume that it will teach that. And it will also teach from chapter number 6, most probably. So chapter number 6 consists of 190 verses, I think, or maybe more. So it's not going to teach all of them, but it's still nice to have the text. Anyway, it's going to be at 12:30.
Yeah. And then we have Discovering Buddhism, Transforming Problems.
All right, and then we have Discovering Buddhism, Transforming Problems in the morning.
Yeah.
Wow, that's like totally Dharma galore. All right, with the right hand and left hand.
No. anyone changing.
So DB starts at 9 to 12, and then his honest is teaching.
Yeah, and then apparently we've got another session of discussion.
Okay.
Afterwards,
You just have to manifest bodies.
He does.
Just manifest bodies. It's easy.
manifest cultures.
All right. Thank you very much, people. Enjoy the rest of the week and the weekend. Lama Sangye Jogene, Dowachi Kamalupa, De Salagopa, Chincho Sancho Rinpoche, Makepa, Make Yochi, Kepan Yampa Mepai, Gone Gondo Pewashu, Kowe Shinkandi, Pendan de Wa Malu Chuwen, Chenrese Wan Tenzin Gatsoi, Shape Site Badu Tengyochi, Tutsu Janshin Jango Yawe. Tenzin Yonpawe Kunzo Dotoze Chosun Kowe Le Mundu Pada Sodu Je Pondu Shapensho. Could have done it in English, but anyway.
Oh, you got to remind us.
Yeah, well, I have to you have to remind me so that I can remind you.
I did it in English.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bakassan.
Have a nice weekend.
Thanks very much. Thank you all. Enjoy.
Bye.
She must have made it back from